The Curse of King Tut's Tomb, November 1922. Howard Carter breaks through a doorway sealed for 3,000 years and becomes the first person to see Tutankhamun's tomb intact. It's one of history's greatest discoveries, and the birthplace of one of its most famous curses. Lord Carnarvon, who financed the dig, was dead within months from an infected mosquito bite. Legend says the lights in Cairo flickered out the instant he died. The story fed itself for years. Team members, secretaries, even the radiologist who x-rayed the mummy, all dying under strange circumstances. But here's the detail the legend leaves out. Howard Carter himself, the man who actually opened the tomb, lived another 16 years and died of natural causes. Science offers a less dramatic answer. Dormant tomb bacteria, ordinary coincidence, and a press that couldn't resist the story. 100 years later, the curse still hasn't loosened its grip. The Holy Grail, the Nazi quest? In 1933. A historian named Otto Rahn publishes a book claiming the Holy Grail is real and hidden in southern France. The book finds its way to Heinrich Himmler, and Himmler sees exactly what he wants to see. The funded expedition fails. Furious, Himmler reassigns Rahn to guard duty at Dachau. Rahn resigns in 1939. Weeks later, he's found frozen in the Alps. But here's where it gets interesting. Himmler's obsession didn't die with him. He believed recovering the Grail would prove Jesus was ethnically Aryan. In 1940, he personally interrogated monks at a Spanish abbey. They gave him nothing. One of history's most brutal regimes spent a decade chasing an object most historians don't think ever existed, and never found it. The Library of Alexandria for 600 years. There was one address for the greatest concentration of knowledge on earth. Then it was gone, and nobody agrees on how. Founded in Egypt in the 3rd century BCE, its mission was to acquire every written work in existence. At its height, it held several 100,000 scrolls found nowhere else on earth. Then it burned. And history can't agree who to blame: Julius Caesar, the Emperor Aurelian, a Christian bishop, even a disputed legend blaming the Muslim conquest, a story most historians think was invented later for political convenience. The real reason was far less cinematic. Centuries of accumulated damage, not one bonfire. Scholars there calculated Earth's circumference 2,000 years before satellites existed to check it. Whatever else sat on those shelves is gone permanently. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang 1974 farmers digging a well in China strike something that isn't rock. A life-sized clay soldier's face staring back. That soldier belonged to an army of over 8,000 terracotta warriors guarding China's first emperor. But the real prize is the sealed chamber at the center, never opened in over 2,000 years. Here's why. An ancient historian described rivers of liquid mercury flowing across a map inside, guarded by automatic crossbow traps, treated as myth for centuries, until soil samples around the mound turned up mercury levels far above normal. That's exactly why it stays sealed. Nobody wants a repeat of Tutankhamun's tomb, where artifacts degraded within hours of exposure. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, 1994. An archaeologist walks a hillside dismissed decades earlier as unimportant. Something about the flint doesn't sit right. He starts digging, and what comes out forces archaeology to rewrite its own timeline, buried underneath. Massive stone pillars, 20 tons each. And here's where the date breaks the story wide open. 9,600 BCE. 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. Older than farming itself. That flips one of archaeology's oldest assumptions. Farming first, then temples. Göbekli Tepe suggests it ran the other way. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. The builders buried the entire complex themselves, on purpose. Nobody has ever explained why. The Nazca Lines and the astronaut stand in the Peruvian desert, and you'll see almost nothing. Get into the air, and the ground turns into animals, spirals, and shapes carved across miles of sand. The Nazca people scraped away dark stones to expose pale sand underneath. Over 1,000 years ago, no blueprint ever found. Nobody knew any of it existed until 1939, when a researcher flying overhead spotted it. The leading theory: a giant astronomical calendar. But one figure doesn't fit. A humanoid shape called the astronaut is carved into a hillside, visible almost nowhere except from directly overhead. Can you explain why a civilization with no aircraft perfected art only visible from the sky?
The Antikythera Mechanism, 1901. Sponge divers find a 2,000-year-old shipwreck and one corroded lump of bronze that looks like scrap. It sits ignored in a drawer for years. Then someone looks closer, and here's where it gets interesting. That lump holds over 30 precision bronze gears. Rebuilt, it turned out to be a machine that tracked the sun and moon, predicted eclipses, and calculated the Olympic cycle built around 100 BCE. And that date is the whole mystery. Nothing this advanced shows up again for 1,400 years. Not Archimedes, the timeline doesn't fit. More likely, an entire school of Greek engineers whose work simply didn't survive. If something this advanced sat unrecognized for 50 years, what else are you walking straight past right now? The Voynich Manuscript, Rome, 1912. A rare book dealer opens an old volume and the room goes quiet. Every page is elegant handwriting and not one word means anything in any known language. Carbon dating proves the vellum is 600 years old. Real book, real mystery. Its pages show plants matching no known species, star charts matching no known sky. Think you'd crack it? The codebreakers who beat Nazi Enigma tried and failed. But here's the twist, run it through a computer, and the text follows patterns exactly like a real language would. It isn't nonsense. Nobody can identify what it is. That leaves three options: an invented private language, an elaborate hoax, or a lost text whose last reader died centuries ago. It sits in Yale's library today, unread. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Copper Scroll, 1947. A shepherd boy throws a rock into a cave just to check for a lost goat. What comes back is the sound of clay breaking. He's just found one of the biggest discoveries of the century. Archaeologists pulled nearly 1,000 ancient manuscripts from nearby caves, but one stands apart. Every other document is parchment. This one is engraved in copper because copper doesn't rot or burn. And here's the twist. It isn't scripture. It's a treasure map listing over 60 locations of gold and silver worth billions today. None of it has ever been found. The landmarks it names vanished 1,000 years ago. But think about the choice to use copper. Nobody builds a message to outlast fire and time unless they mean for someone to actually follow it. The Lost Tomb of Genghis Khan, 1227. Somewhere in the hills of northern China, the most powerful man alive is dying, and his empire is about to make sure you never find out where they put him. Even his own soldiers weren't told how he died. But here's where it gets interesting. What happened to his body after is wilder still. Legend says the men who carried it killed every traveler they passed. Then those men were killed too. A river was rerouted over the grave. 1,000 horses trampled the ground until it looked untouched. Today, the Khenti Mountains are so sacred you weren't allowed to walk them for 800 years. Satellites, radar, decades of expeditions, nothing has ever found it. Somewhere under that ground, the man who once ruled a quarter of the known world is still lying exactly where his soldiers left him. The empire is gone. The secret isn't.